the son of his great love, Anastasia, struck dead by Ivan himself.
Welcome to Watch Mojo. And today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 worst fathers in history.
I would say that he was very charismatic.
Emperor Constantine the Great. Despite his moniker of the Great, the first Christian Roman emperor was not exactly a great father. His eldest son, Flavius Julius Crispus, was a beloved and faithful heir, even earning the title of Caesar from his father. According to some historians, rumors spread that Constantine the Great's second wife and Crispus's stepmother, Empress Fausta, and Crispus were involved in an affair. Because of the rumors, Constantine had his son murdered in a fit of rage. Shortly thereafter, he ordered that the royal baths be heated to such a temperature that Empress Fausta was boiled alive, making him a contender for the top 10 worst husbands list as well. Peter the Great. During his reign, Peter I ushered Russia into the modern age, even updating the Russian alphabet and calendar. However, his eldest son, Tsarevich Alexei, was more old-fashioned and conservative in his beliefs. When Peter threatened to strip Alexei of his succession, his son volunteered to give up his claim. But Peter believed his political adversaries would rally around his son. Peter told his son to fight for the throne or become a monk. But Alexei elected to flee to Austria instead.
Alexei throws himself on the mercy of the Emperor of Austria.
When Alexei returned to Russia in hopes of reconciling with his father, he was publicly disinherited. Months later, Alexei was tortured to death under his father's orders.
Peter condemns his son to be lashed with the knout.
Frederick William I of Prussia. Unfortunately, the vile actions of this father aren't unheard of in some families today. Also known as the Soldier King, Frederick I tried to force his heir and eldest son, Frederick II, also known as Fritz, to conform to his militaristic lifestyle.
But the cultured prince was a grave disappointment to his authoritarian father.
When Fritz was a child, the king woke him with cannon fire every morning and forbade him from pursuing music and reading books. Frederick I even beat his son for wearing gloves in cold weather.
Frederick William became increasingly violent. He frequently cuffed, slapped, and humiliated the prince.
When Fritz tried to flee Prussia with his rumored lover, Hans Hermann von Katte, the two men were imprisoned. The cruel king threatened to execute the prince and forced his son to watch as Katte was beheaded. Despite the actions of his father, Fritz eventually became king and was styled as Frederick the Great.
Within 3 years of Katte's death, resigned to his dynastic obligations as heir to the throne, Frederick reluctantly agreed to marry an Austrian-approved bride.
Genghis Khan. If you ever find yourself in a large crowd, there's a good chance you might be brushing shoulders with at least one descendant of the founder of the Mongol Empire. In fact, it's estimated that approximately 1 in 200 men living today is directly descended from Genghis Khan.
The warrior king Genghis Khan started a dynasty that impregnated whole nations for more than 150 years.
While Khan no doubt fathered almost countless children, making him a majorly absent parent, his acknowledged children had to follow in his footsteps.
Up to 16 million men today who live in regions that Khan conquered could have been descendants of him or his close male relatives.
After Khan's passing, his heirs continued his conquering ways. His last known ruling descendant was still in power in 1920, nearly 700 years after his death.
And within a single lifetime, he created the largest contiguous empire in human history.
Joseph Stalin. As we've discussed on this channel, Stalin was not exactly a kind person, and that even extended to his own son, Yakov. After Yakov's mother and Stalin's first wife, Kato Zvadnidze, passed away, Yakov lived with his aunts. Stalin moved Yakov to Moscow when his son turned 14. Their relationship quickly deteriorated, with Stalin making Yakov sleep in the dining room and even forbidding his son from taking his last name. Yakov suffered from depression and attempted to take his life several times. After one attempt, Stalin allegedly said, "He can't even shoot straight." When Yakov was captured by Nazis during World War II, Stalin refused to make moves to get him released from prison, where Yakov ultimately perished. Ptolemy VIII Physcon. Often regarded as one of the worst rulers in Egypt's history, Ptolemy VIII, nicknamed Phaiskhon, was a cruel pharaoh and even worse family member. As the norm amongst the pharaohs of ancient Egypt, Phaiskhon married his sister Cleopatra II, but as was definitely not the norm, some historians believe he murdered his sister's son on their wedding night. In 136 BC, Cleopatra II and Phaiskhon declared war against each other, and in retaliation, Phaiskhon murdered their only son, Memphites. The cruel tyrant sent the butchered remains of the child to his wife and sister on her birthday. We know this list is about horrible fathers, but Phaiskhon is absolutely in the running for both the worst spouse and worst sibling in history. Speaking of terrible spouses, Henry VIII. Considering there's an entire Broadway musical based on how terribly he treated his wives, it should come as no surprise that Henry VIII was a horrible father to his daughters. He caused religious upheaval to divorce his first wife and the mother of his daughter, Mary, Catherine of Aragon. Mary was subsequently declared illegitimate, stripped of her succession, and was not allowed to see her mother, even when the former queen was on her deathbed.
Mother and daughter never met, and Henry's cruelty towards Mary did not cease with her mother's death. He refused her permission to attend Catherine's funeral as well.
The king's second wife, Anne Boleyn, also bore a daughter, Elizabeth. When Elizabeth wasn't even 3 years old, Henry had her mother beheaded and stripped Elizabeth of her succession and declared her illegitimate.
She was allowed back to court, but the new Act of Succession did not restore Mary as his heir. Instead, it stripped Mary's half-sister, the infant Elizabeth, of her titles and status.
Of course, both Mary and Elizabeth eventually ruled England as queens, but their childhoods were full of trauma.
It was the most peaceful transition of power England had seen in more than a century. Elizabeth would rule for the next 45 years.
Ivan the Terrible. Finally, we have someone whose title reflects the kind of father he was. Although historians' opinions on Ivan's personality differ, many agree the Tsar was mentally unstable and prone to episodes of rage. He and his eldest son and heir, also named Ivan, had a rocky relationship, and the younger's wife was unfortunately dragged in the middle. The Tsar attacked his pregnant daughter-in-law for wearing clothing he deemed inappropriate, causing her to miscarry.
Ivan was furious at the dress of his daughter-in-law and was furious at the way she behaved towards him.
When the younger Ivan confronted the Tsar for attacking his wife, the elder Ivan attacked his own son with a scepter, killing him.
The son of his great love, Anastasia, struck dead by Ivan himself.
Although he immediately regretted the action, the deed was done and ultimately led to Russia's time of troubles. Lot. Accounts of Lot's relationship with his children differ from religion to religion and translation to translation, but across the board, his treatment of his daughters is pretty atrocious. In the book of Genesis, Lot played host to 2 angels when they visited the city of Sodom. His vile neighbors surrounded Lot's house and asked him to hand over the angels so they could know them. Yeah, in the biblical sense. Instead of simply telling the mob to get lost, Lot threw out his 2 virgin daughters as sacrifices to the mob, telling the mob to know them instead. While there are some other incredibly questionable interactions between Lot and his daughters, this one alone lands Lot at the number 2 spot. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Herod the Great. Considering the fact that this king had his wife Mariamne executed because of his own paranoia, it comes as no great surprise that he was a bad dad.
Herod had Mariamne executed. It may have been a politically useful marriage, but Herod was also obsessed with her.
More than 2 decades after Mariamne's murder, her and Herod's sons Alexander and Aristobulus were charged with treason. Because Herod believed his sons would avenge their mother, they were executed without trial, leaving the line of succession to another one of Herod's sons, Antipater.
In 7 BC, his temper got the better of him, and he had the scheming pair strangled.
As Herod entered his final days, his paranoia grew, and he charged Antipater with attempting to murder him. Antipater was executed, and Herod passed away shortly after, ending his campaign of filicide once and for all.
Herod's firstborn, the son he had brought back from exile to succeed him, had jumped too soon. His father rallied, finding the strength to order his immediate execution.
Who do you think is the worst father in history? Be sure to share in the comments below.
Accounts say the Tsar felt haunted by the thousands he'd had killed, not least the murder of his own beloved son.